My name is Isabella, and at 28 years old, I thought I knew what family betrayal looked like. I was wrong. Last Thanksgiving, my mother looked me straight in the eyes across our dinner table and said 5 words that shattered everything. I wish you were never born. What happened next changed our family forever, exposed decades of lies, and proved that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones plotting your destruction. The truth about my inheritance was just the beginning. Before we dive into this story, I want to know, where are you watching from today? If family drama and shocking revelations are your thing, smash that like button and subscribe, because this story has more twists than a soap opera. Trust me, you will want to see how this ends and what my mother never saw coming. The signs were always there, but I was too naive to see them. Growing up, my relationship with my mother, Patricia, was complicated at best. She was the type of woman who smiled sweetly in public, but had a tongue sharp enough to cut glass behind closed doors. My father passed away when I was 15, leaving behind a substantial estate and a will that heavily favored me, something that apparently never sat well with my mother or my older brother Marcus. For 13 years after Dad's death, Mom controlled everything. She was the executor of his will, managing my inheritance until I turned 28. Every time I asked about accessing my trust fund for college, starting a business, or buying a house, she had an excuse. The market is bad, she would say, or, your father wanted you to be responsible first. I believed her because, well, she was my mother. The Thanksgiving dinner from hell started innocently enough. I had driven 3 hours from my apartment in Portland to our family home in Salem, Oregon. Marcus was there with his wife Jennifer and their twin boys. The house smelled like turkey and sage stuffing, and for a brief moment everything felt normal. Mom had even complimented my new dress, a rare occurrence that should have been my first red flag. We were halfway through dinner when I mentioned that I had been looking at houses. Nothing fancy, I said, cutting into my turkey. Just a small starter home. I figured now that I am about to turn 29, it might be time to think about settling down, and maybe starting my own family. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Marcus exchanged a look with Jennifer that I caught but could not decode. Mom set down her wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. About that, Marcus said, clearing his throat. Mom and I have been meaning to talk to you about Dad's will. My fork stopped midway to my mouth. What about it? Patricia leaned back in her chair, and I saw something in her eyes I had never seen before. Pure, undiluted hatred. Isabella, sweetheart, there have been some complications with your inheritance. What kind of complications? My voice was steady, but my heart was starting to race. Well, it turns out your father made some poor investment choices before he died, Marcus said, not meeting my eyes. The trust fund has been depleted. I stared at them both. Depleted? How is that possible? Dad left me $400,000. Mom laughed, actually laughed. Oh, honey, that money has been keeping this family afloat for years. Do you think Marcus could afford that house in the suburbs on a teacher's salary? Do you think I could maintain this house on my pension? The world started spinning. You spent my inheritance. We used family money for family needs, Patricia said coldly. Besides, you have never contributed anything meaningful to this family. Marcus has given me grandchildren. He has value. You bounce from job to job, relationship to relationship. You are just like your father, selfish and irresponsible. I felt like I had been slapped. Selfish, I have been working 2 jobs to support myself while waiting for money that was legally mine. Legally yours, Marcus scoffed. Mom was the executor. She had every right to make financial decisions for the family's benefit. For the family's benefit, I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. That was my inheritance. Dad left that money specifically for me. That is when Patricia's mask finally slipped completely. Her face twisted into something ugly and cruel. Your father was a fool, and so are you if you think you deserved any of it. Do you want to know the truth, Isabella? I wish you were never born. This family would have been so much better off without you draining our resources and causing nothing but problems. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Marcus looked shocked at how far she had gone. Jennifer was staring at her plate like she wanted to disappear. The twins had stopped eating and were looking around confused. But instead of crying or yelling like they probably expected, something cold and clear settled over me. I looked at my mother, this woman who had given birth to me, raised me, and apparently despised me for my entire existence, and I felt nothing but clarity. "You know what, Patricia?" I said, using her first name deliberately. "Consider me dead." I picked up my purse, grabbed my coat, and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Marcus calling my name, but I did not turn around. As I reached my car, Patricia appeared in the doorway. "Where are you going?" she shouted. "We are not done talking about this." I rolled down my window and looked at her one last time. "Yes, we are. You got what you wanted. A family without me in it. Congratulations." As I drove away, I could see her standing in the doorway, probably expecting me to come crawling back like I always had before. But something fundamental had shifted in those few minutes. The little girl who desperately wanted her mother's approval had died in that dining room, and in her place was a woman with nothing left to lose. I had no idea that within 72 hours I would discover just how deep their betrayal went, or that the nuclear option I was about to deploy would expose secrets that would destroy them all. The drive back to Portland was a blur of rain and rage. By the time I reached my apartment, the shock had worn off and been replaced by something far more dangerous: cold, calculated fury. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, letting the reality sink in. My mother and brother had stolen my inheritance, and somehow thought they could gaslight me into accepting it. But here is the thing about growing up with manipulative people: you learn to be strategic. While they assumed I would crumble under their emotional abuse, I was already planning my next move. The first step was finding out exactly how much they had stolen, and whether what they did was even legal. Monday morning, I took a personal day from my job at the marketing firm and drove straight to the law offices of Henderson and Associates. My father had used their firm for his will, and I was hoping they still had records. What I discovered there changed everything. "Miss Morrison," the elderly lawyer, Mr. Henderson said as he pulled out a thick file, "I have been wondering when you would come to see us. Your mother was supposed to transfer control of the trust to you on your 25th birthday." My blood ran cold. My 25th birthday, but she told me I could not access it until I was 28. Henderson frowned deeply. "That is absolutely incorrect. The will was very specific: full control transfers to you at 25, with the option to begin drawing funds for education or home purchase at 21. He handed me a copy of the original will. "Your father was very clear about this. He wanted you to have financial independence." As I read through the document, my hands started shaking. Not only was I supposed to have had access to my money for 3 years already, but the original amount was not $400,000. It was $750,000 plus accumulated interest and investment gains. "Mr. Henderson," I said carefully, "what would the current value of this trust be?" He pulled out a calculator and started working. "Conservatively, with proper investment management, you should be looking at approximately $1.2 million. I actually felt dizzy. $1.2 million. Your father was very smart about his investments, and he specifically instructed that the money be placed in conservative but growing funds." Henderson looked troubled. "Miss Morrison, I hate to ask this, but has your mother been providing you with regular statements about the trust's performance?" She told me there were no statements. She said the money was just sitting in a savings account and there have been complications. Henderson's face went pale. That would be a serious breach of her fiduciary duty as executor. "Miss Morrison, I think we need to involve our financial crimes attorney immediately." The next 3 hours were a whirlwind of phone calls, document requests, and increasingly alarming discoveries. Not only had Patricia been lying about when I could access my inheritance, but she had been systematically draining the account for years. Bank records showed large transfers to accounts belonging to both her and Marcus, disguised as estate management fees and family emergency funds. But the real bombshell came when Henderson's investigator pulled credit reports. Patricia had been using my Social Security number to take out loans against the trust, effectively using my future inheritance as collateral for her and Marcus's lifestyle. The house Marcus lived in purchased with a loan secured against my money. Patricia's new car, her kitchen renovation, Marcus's family vacation to Europe last summer, all funded by my inheritance. This is fraud, the financial crimes attorney Sarah Chen told me bluntly. This is not just breach of fiduciary duty. This is identity theft, wire fraud, and embezzlement. We are looking at potential federal charges. I sat in that conference room staring at a paper trail that proved everything I had suspected and worse. My mother had not just stolen from me, she had built her entire post-divorce life on my money, while making me feel like a burden for even existing. What are my options? I asked. Sarah laid out 3 paths. I could demand immediate restitution and hope they could pay it back. I could pursue civil litigation, or I could file criminal charges. If you want my professional opinion, she said, the criminal route is your best bet for full recovery. The FBI takes financial crimes very seriously, especially when they involve elder abuse of trust and identity theft. Elder abuse. But I am not elderly. Your mother abused her position of trust over a vulnerable family member's finances, Sarah explained. In legal terms, you were vulnerable because you were dependent on her honesty about your financial situation. The law treats these cases very seriously. As I sat there, I thought about Patricia's words from Thanksgiving, "I wish you were never born." Well, she was about to get a masterclass in consequences. I want to file criminal charges, I said. All of them. Sarah nodded approvingly. It will not be easy. They will probably try to claim it was all misunderstandings or family loans. They might even try to turn your extended family against you. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. They already turned the family against me years ago. I have nothing left to lose. What I did not tell Sarah was that I had something even better than just the legal system on my side. During my father's final illness, he had given me something that nobody else knew about, including Patricia. Hidden in my childhood bedroom, taped under the bottom drawer of my old desk, was a letter he had written specifically for me to find if anything ever happened to my inheritance. As I drove home that evening, I realized that my father had known exactly what kind of person he was married to. He had suspected this day might come, and he had prepared for it. The letter was not just an expression of love, it was evidence. And when I combined it with what Henderson had found, I would have enough ammunition to destroy Patricia and Marcus so completely that they would never recover. The war was about to begin, and they had no idea what was coming for them. That night, I sat on my bedroom floor like a kid again, carefully removing the tape from under my old desk drawer. My hands were trembling as I pulled out the sealed envelope marked, "For Isabella, open only if something happens to your money." Even from beyond the grave, my father was protecting me. The letter inside was 3 pages long, written in Dad's familiar handwriting. As I read it, tears streamed down my face, not from sadness but from relief that someone had seen the truth. "My dearest Isabella," it began, "if you are reading this, it means Patricia has done exactly what I feared she would do. I want you to know that every penny I left you was meant for your future, not to subsidize the lifestyle of people who should be taking care of themselves. Your mother has always been jealous of you, jealous of your independence, your creativity, and yes, jealous of how much I loved you. Marcus has inherited her sense of entitlement. I pray I am wrong about them, but if I am right, this letter will serve as proof that I never intended for anyone else to benefit from your inheritance." But the real bombshell was in the second paragraph. "I have documented evidence of Patricia's spending habits and financial irresponsibility in a safety deposit box at First National Bank. The key is taped inside the old photo album in my closet, the one with pictures from our camping trips, box number 4792. Use this evidence to protect yourself." My father had been building a case against my mother for years before he died. The next morning, I called in sick to work again and drove to the bank. The safety deposit box was exactly where Dad said it would be, and what I found inside was devastating. Dad had been secretly documenting every financial argument, every suspicious purchase, every time Patricia had demanded money from his accounts. There were photographs of credit card statements, copies of arguments she had made for various expenditures, and most damning of all, a recording device with hours of conversations where Patricia explicitly stated her intentions to limit my access to the inheritance. In one particularly chilling recording from just weeks before Dad's death, I heard Patricia say, "That girl does not deserve everything you are planning to give her. Marcus is the one who will take care of me in my old age. Isabella will probably just waste it all on some stupid business idea or boyfriend." Dad's voice responded weakly. He was already very sick by then. But firmly, "Patricia, that money is specifically for Isabella's future. It is not a family piggy bank." "We will see about that," Patricia had replied. Well, she had made good on that threat, but she had no idea that Dad had recorded her essentially confessing to premeditated theft. Armed with this evidence, I met with Sarah Chen again. When she heard the recordings, her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "This is prosecutorial gold," she said. "Your mother basically confessed to planning the theft before your father even died. Combined with the financial records, we have them dead to rights." But Sarah also gave me strategic advice that proved invaluable. Before we file charges, we should give them an opportunity to make this right. Not because they deserve mercy, but because it will make them panic and potentially incriminate themselves further. That is when I hatched a plan that was perhaps more devious than anything Patricia had ever done to me. Instead of immediately going to the FBI, I would let Marcus and Patricia think they had gotten away with it, while systematically gathering more evidence of their crimes, and building a network of allies who could testify to their character. My first stop was Jennifer, Marcus's wife. I had always suspected she was uncomfortable with how her husband and mother-in-law treated me, and I was right. When I showed up at her work, she was a nurse at Salem General Hospital, and asked if we could talk privately. She immediately agreed. "Isabella, I have felt terrible about Thanksgiving," she said, before I could even speak. "What your mother said was horrible. And honestly, Marcus has been acting weird about money for months." I showed her some of the financial documents. Not the recordings, not yet, but enough to prove that Marcus had been living beyond his means. Jennifer went pale as she realized her house, her car, her children's private school tuition, all of it had been funded by my stolen inheritance. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I thought Marcus had gotten a promotion or his investments had paid off. He told me his mother had helped with the down payment on the house, but he made it sound like it was her own money." Jennifer became my first ally, but more importantly, she became my inside source. She agreed to start documenting Marcus's financial behavior and any conversations about money in their household. Within a week, she had recordings of Marcus bragging to his friends about how he had convinced his mother to invest my inheritance in his future instead of letting me waste it. My next ally came from an unexpected source, Patricia's own sister, my Aunt Rebecca. Rebecca and Patricia had been feuding for years over their own inheritance disputes when their parents died. When I reached out to Rebecca and explained what had happened, her response was immediate and fierce. "That manipulative witch," Rebecca said. "She pulled the exact same garbage with our mother's jewelry collection. Convinced Mom to leave everything to her, then sold it all and never shared a dime with the rest of us." Rebecca had her own evidence of Patricia's financial manipulation patterns, including court documents from previous family disputes. More importantly, she had access to Patricia's social media accounts and had been screenshotting her lavish lifestyle posts for months, wondering how a woman on a fixed pension could afford such luxuries. But my most valuable ally turned out to be someone I had never expected. Marcus's best friend from college, David, who worked as a financial advisor. When Jennifer mentioned to David that she was concerned about Marcus's sudden wealth, David revealed something shocking. Marcus had actually consulted him months ago about the best ways to hide assets from potential creditors or family claims. "At the time, I thought he was just being paranoid about lawsuits from his teaching job," David told me when I met with him. "But now that you are telling me about the inheritance situation, I realize he was asking me how to hide your money from you." David had kept detailed notes of their conversation, including Marcus's admission that the money technically belonged to his sister, but that his mother had convinced him he deserved it more. Within 2 weeks, I had built an airtight case with multiple witnesses, recorded confessions, financial evidence, and a pattern of behavior going back years. But more than that, I had systematically isolated Patricia and Marcus from their support network. Jennifer was now on my side and feeding me information. Rebecca was ready to testify about Patricia's history of financial manipulation. David had evidence of Marcus's premeditated intent to hide stolen funds. The beauty of it was that neither Patricia nor Marcus had any idea what was coming. They thought their angry daughter and sister had slunk away to lick her wounds. They had no clue that I was building a case that would not just get my money back but would likely send them both to federal prison. As I sat in Sarah Chen's office reviewing the mountain of evidence we had compiled, she asked me one final question. Isabella, are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we file these charges, there is no going back. Your relationship with your family will be permanently destroyed. I thought about Patricia's words again, I wish you were never born. Then I thought about my father's letter about 13 years of lies about Marcus, laughing with his friends about stealing from his sister. They destroyed our relationship years ago, I said. I am just making it official. The next morning we filed charges with the FBI. The reckoning was about to begin, and it would be more devastating than they ever could have imagined. The FBI moved faster than I had anticipated. Within 72 hours of filing the complaint, Special Agent Maria Rodriguez was sitting in my living room, reviewing the evidence with the kind of professional intensity that made me understand why white-collar criminals usually get caught. This is one of the most well-documented cases of family financial fraud I have seen in 15 years, Agent Rodriguez told me, flipping through the recordings and bank statements. Your father essentially built the entire case for us before he died. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than immediately arresting Patricia and Marcus, the FBI would conduct a controlled investigation, allowing them to continue their normal activities while agents gathered additional evidence. This meant I had to pretend everything was normal while wearing a wire during family interactions. We need them to incriminate themselves further, Agent Rodriguez explained. Right now they might claim the money transfers were loans or family assistance. We need them to admit they knew they were stealing. The first test came when Patricia called me 3 days after our initial FBI meeting. I was sitting in Sarah Chen's office wearing a recording device when my phone rang. Isabella, sweetheart, Patricia's voice was sickeningly sweet. I have been thinking about our conversation at Thanksgiving. Maybe I was a little harsh. I exchanged glances with Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. A little harsh, Mom. You told me you wished I was never born and admitted to stealing my inheritance. Oh, honey, it was not stealing. It was family resource management. Your father would have understood. There it was, the admission we needed. Patricia had just confessed on a recorded FBI wire that she had taken my inheritance without permission. Family resource management, I kept my voice steady. That money was specifically left to me. Well, yes, but Marcus has children to support and I have expenses. You are young and single. You do not need that kind of money right now. Agent Rodriguez was making frantic gestures, encouraging me to keep her talking. So you are saying you decided what I needed, and took my inheritance accordingly. Exactly. See, I knew you would understand eventually. You have always been such a smart girl. The conversation continued for 20 more minutes, with Patricia digging herself deeper into legal quicksand with every word. She admitted to forging documents, transferring funds without authorization, and even revealed that she had been planning this since before my father died. But the real bombshell came when she said, besides, your father was getting senile at the end. He did not really understand what he was doing with that will. I was just correcting his mistakes. That statement alone would invalidate any claim she had been following my father's wishes. The next phase of the operation involved Marcus. Agent Rodriguez arranged for Jennifer to invite me to a family barbecue where Marcus would be more relaxed and likely to say something incriminating. Jennifer had agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation in exchange for immunity for any unknowing participation in the scheme. The barbecue was surreal. I sat on Marcus's deck watching him flip burgers while wearing an FBI wire, knowing that every word he spoke was being recorded by federal agents parked down the street. Marcus was even more careless than Patricia had been. Emboldened by what he thought was my acceptance of the situation, he actually bragged about how cleverly he had manipulated the inheritance. The trick he told his neighbor loud enough for everyone to hear was convincing Mom that Isabella was not responsible enough for that kind of money. Once we established that narrative, it was easy to redirect the funds to more practical uses. You mean your house? I asked innocently. Marcus laughed. Among other things. That money has been much better invested in our family's future than it would have been sitting in some account waiting for Isabella to figure out what to do with her life. But it was not your money to invest, I said. Technically, no, Marcus admitted. But Mom was the executor, so she had discretion. And honestly, Isabella, you have never exactly been financially responsible. Remember when you wanted to start that photography business? Or when you were dating that musician, Dad's money would have been gone in 6 months. The FBI had everything they needed, but Agent Rodriguez wanted one final piece of evidence, proof that they had actively concealed their actions from me. This required the most difficult performance of my life. I called Patricia and asked if we could meet for coffee to work things out. She agreed immediately, probably thinking she had successfully manipulated me into accepting their theft. We met at a small cafe in Salem where I was wired for sound and FBI agents were positioned at nearby tables. Patricia arrived, wearing a new designer coat that probably cost more than I made in a month. I am so glad you called, sweetheart, she said, hugging me with fake warmth. I knew you would come around and see that we did what was best for everyone. I have been thinking about what you said, I replied. About Dad being senile and not understanding his own will. Patricia's eyes lit up. She thought she was about to close the deal. Exactly. Your father was not thinking clearly those last few months. All those pain medications, the stress of being sick. He was not making rational financial decisions. So you corrected those decisions. I had to. As his wife and the mother of his children, I had a responsibility to protect the family's interests. Even if it meant taking money he specifically left to me, Patricia leaned forward conspiratorially. Isabella, honey, your father left you that money because he felt guilty about not spending enough time with you when you were growing up. It was guilt money, not a rational financial decision. I simply redirected those funds to family members who could use them responsibly. The final nail in her coffin came when she added, "Besides, it is not like you would ever find out the real numbers anyway. I made sure all the paperwork was adjusted to reflect the smaller amount." There it was. Admission to document fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, and premeditated deception. Agent Rodriguez later told me that Patricia had essentially confessed to enough federal crimes to put her away for 20 years. That afternoon, the FBI executed search warrants on both Patricia's house and Marcus's home. They seized computers, financial records, and boxes of documents. Neighbors watched in shock as federal agents carried evidence out of the houses of two seemingly respectable middle-class citizens. Patricia was arrested at her book club meeting. Marcus was taken into custody at the school, where he taught in front of his colleagues and students. The local news picked up the story, local mother and son arrested for stealing family inheritance. As I watched the news coverage from my apartment in Portland, I felt something I had not experienced in years. Peace. For the first time since my father died, the truth was finally being told. The people who had stolen from me, lied to me, and emotionally abused me were facing consequences for their actions. But I had no idea that the arrests were just the beginning of their downfall. The aftermath of the arrests was more devastating than even I had anticipated. Within hours of the FBI raid, Patricia and Marcus's carefully constructed lives began crumbling like houses built on sand. Marcus was immediately placed on administrative leave from his teaching position. The school district could not have a teacher facing federal charges for theft and fraud in their classrooms. His principal, who had known him for 8 years later, told reporters she was shocked and devastated by the allegations. But the professional consequences were nothing compared to what was happening in their personal lives. Jennifer filed for divorce the day after Marcus's arrest, taking the twins and moving in with her parents. She had discovered that not only had Marcus stolen my inheritance, but he had also been lying to her about their financial situation for years. "I cannot have my children growing up thinking this behavior is acceptable," Jennifer told me when she called to apologize. "Marcus has been living a lie, and he dragged my family into it." The divorce proceedings revealed even more disturbing details about Marcus's character. Jennifer's attorney discovered that Marcus had taken out life insurance policies on both his children with himself as the sole beneficiary. He had also been secretly borrowing against his pension and had accumulated over $60,000 in credit card debt that Jennifer knew nothing about. He was not just stealing from you, Jennifer's attorney explained to me during one of our meetings. He was setting up his entire family for financial ruin. If this had continued, he would have destroyed everyone around him. Patricia's situation was even worse. Without Marcus's income to help support her lifestyle and facing massive legal bills, she was forced to put her house up for sale immediately. But here is the beautiful irony. Because she had used my stolen inheritance money for the down payment and renovations, the FBI had placed a lien on the property. She could not sell it without the proceeds going directly toward restitution. The house that my father had bought for our family that Patricia had kicked me out of after his death was now essentially mine again through legal seizure. Agent Rodriguez informed me that once the criminal proceedings were complete, I would likely recover the full value of my inheritance plus interest and penalties. But the legal consequences were just the beginning of their social destruction. Salem is a small city, and news travels fast. Within a week of the arrests, both Patricia and Marcus had become pariahs in their community. Patricia was asked to resign from her positions on the hospital charity board and the library foundation. The book club she had belonged to for 12 years quietly asked her not to return. Her church, where she had been a prominent member and regular donor, suddenly found reasons why her volunteer services were no longer needed. Marcus faced even harsher social consequences. Parents at his school launched a petition demanding his permanent removal from the district. His coaching position with the local Little League was terminated immediately. The teachers' union, while obligated to provide legal representation, made it clear they viewed his actions as a betrayal of educator ethics. Most painfully for both of them, their extended family began choosing sides, and most of those sides were not theirs. Aunt Rebecca organized a family meeting, where she presented evidence of Patricia's history of financial manipulation to cousins, uncles, and family friends who had previously viewed Patricia as a respectable widow. "This is not the first time Patricia has stolen from family," Rebecca told the assembled relatives. "She did the same thing to our mother's estate, and we all just accepted it because we did not want to cause drama. Well, look what enabling her behavior led to." One by one, family members who had attended Patricia's dinner parties and celebrated holidays at her house began distancing themselves. Cousins who had borrowed money from Patricia suddenly realized where that money had actually come from and were horrified to learn they had unknowingly participated in spending my stolen inheritance. The psychological impact on both Patricia and Marcus was evident every time I saw them at legal proceedings. Patricia, who had always been immaculately dressed and perfectly composed, appeared at her arraignment looking haggard and desperate. The woman who had once confidently told me she wished I had never been born could barely make eye contact with anyone in the courtroom. Marcus's transformation was even more dramatic. The brother who had smugly explained how he had convinced our mother to redirect my inheritance to his family now looked like a broken man. His attorney later told Sarah Chen that Marcus had suffered a complete nervous breakdown and was requiring psychiatric medication to function. But perhaps the most satisfying collapse came when their legal strategy fell apart. Initially, both Patricia and Marcus had planned to claim that the money transfers were legitimate family loans or gifts. However, as the FBI investigation deepened, it became clear that they had left a paper trail of deception that made such claims impossible. The recordings my father had made were played in open court. Hearing Patricia's voice saying, "We will see about that," in response to my father's insistence that the money was specifically for me was devastating to their defense. Her own words, captured years before they committed the theft, proved premeditation beyond any reasonable doubt. Marcus's case was equally hopeless. The financial advisor who had testified about Marcus asking how to hide assets from family members provided evidence that Marcus had known exactly what he was doing and had sought professional advice on how to avoid getting caught. Their attorneys advised them to accept plea bargains rather than risk even harsher sentences at trial. Patricia agreed to plead guilty to wire fraud, identity theft, and breach of fiduciary duty, in exchange for a recommended sentence of 18 months in federal prison plus full restitution. Marcus accepted a similar deal for his role as a co-conspirator. But the plea hearings provided one final moment of perfect justice. As part of the plea agreement, both Patricia and Marcus were required to make public statements, acknowledging their crimes, and apologizing to their victim, me. Standing in that courtroom watching the woman who had told me she wished I was never born publicly admit that she had stolen my father's gift to me and apologize for the pain she had caused was surreal. Her voice shook as she read the court-mandated apology, and for the first time in my life I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Marcus's apology was even more pathetic. This man who had laughed about redirecting my inheritance to his own family was now crying as he admitted to destroying his marriage, his career, and his children's future for money that was never his to take. As I left the courthouse that day, Agent Rodriguez walked with me to my car. You know, she said, in 15 years of investigating financial crimes, I have never seen such complete and total consequences for the perpetrators. Usually there are some relationships that survive some aspects of their lives that remain intact, but these two have lost absolutely everything. I thought about that as I drove home. Patricia and Marcus had not just lost money or faced legal consequences. They had lost their identities, their community, their family, and their future. The people who had told me I was worthless and had no value had discovered what real worthlessness looked like. 8 months after that devastating Thanksgiving dinner, I was standing in the same courthouse where Patricia and Marcus had been sentenced, but this time I was there for a very different reason. The civil restitution hearing had concluded, and the judge had just awarded me full recovery of my inheritance plus interest penalties and attorney fees. The total amount was just over $1.4 million. But more importantly than the money, I had something I had never experienced before in my life: complete vindication. Every person who had ever doubted my version of events, every family member who had suggested I was being dramatic or ungrateful, every friend who had told me to just get over it with family issues, now understood that I had been telling the truth all along. The money from the restitution allowed me to finally pursue the dreams my father had intended to support. I quit my corporate marketing job and opened my own photography studio, specializing in family portraits and wedding photography. The irony was not lost on me that I was building a business celebrating families and love after escaping from such a toxic family situation. Jennifer had become an unexpected ally and friend through the entire process. After her divorce from Marcus was finalized, she often brought her twins to my studio for photos. I want them to have pictures that show them happy and free, she told me. I want them to forget the chaos their father brought into our lives. Jennifer and I had developed a sister-like relationship that I had never experienced with my biological family. She was the one who helped me pick out furniture for my new house, a beautiful craftsman-style home that I purchased with my recovered inheritance. She was the one who celebrated with me when my photography business landed its first major wedding contract. You know what I realized, Jennifer said one evening as we sat on my new deck watching her boys play in my backyard. Marcus and Patricia always talked about family loyalty and family obligations, but they never actually demonstrated love or support. What you and I have built together, this is what real family feels like. She was right. The family that had raised me had been built on manipulation, obligation, and conditional love. But the chosen family I was creating was based on mutual respect, genuine care, and authentic support. Aunt Rebecca had also become a much more significant presence in my life. After Patricia's sentencing, Rebecca reached out to share stories about our family history that Patricia had never told me. It turned out my father had been the family success story, the one who had broken free from a pattern of financial dysfunction and manipulation that went back generations. Your grandmother was just like Patricia, Rebecca told me. Always scheming about money, always playing family members against each other. Your father was the only one who refused to participate in the drama, and that is why he was so successful. You have his integrity, Isabella. That is why Patricia resented you so much. The most unexpected development came 6 months after the sentencing, when I received a letter forwarded through my attorney. It was from Marcus, written from federal prison. In the letter, Marcus admitted that he had always known what they were doing was wrong, but he had been too weak to stand up to Patricia. He apologized not just for stealing my money, but for years of treating me like I was less valuable than he was. He acknowledged that his children would grow up knowing their father was a thief, and he accepted responsibility for destroying his family. "I do not expect forgiveness," he wrote. "I do not deserve it. But I want you to know that watching you build a successful life with the money we stole has shown me what integrity looks like. You could have used this situation to destroy us out of spite, but instead you used the legal system to seek justice. You are a better person than either Patricia or I ever were." I never responded to the letter, but I kept it. Not because I forgave him, but because it represented something important. Acknowledgement of the truth from someone who had spent years gaslighting me about my own reality. Patricia never apologized beyond what the court required. She served her sentence and was released after 14 months. I heard through family members that she moved to a small apartment in a different state and took a minimum wage job at a grocery store. Her dreams of a comfortable retirement funded by my inheritance had evaporated along with her social status and family relationships. The last I heard, she was completely alone. No family members stayed in regular contact with her, and she had been unable to rebuild any meaningful relationships in her new location. The woman who had wished I was never born was now living with the consequences of having effectively murdered her own family relationships through greed and manipulation. As for me, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. My photography business was thriving. I had genuine friendships for the first time, and I was in a healthy romantic relationship with someone who respected my independence and celebrated my success. My boyfriend, David, not the financial advisor who had helped build the case, but a different David I met through my photography work, often said he admired how I had turned such a devastating betrayal into motivation for Setastin, building something beautiful. "You could have let their toxicity poison you," he told me. "Instead, you used their cruelty as fuel to become the person your father hoped you would be." Sometimes late at night, I thought about my father's letter and how proud he would have been to see me fight for what was rightfully mine. He had been right to fear what Patricia would do, and he had been brilliant to prepare for it. But more than that, he had raised me with enough strength and integrity to see justice through to the end. The little girl who had desperately wanted her mother's love had finally learned that some people are incapable of genuine love. But that same little girl had grown into a woman who could create the family and life she had always deserved. Looking back now, I realize that Patricia's cruelest words, "I wish you were never born," had actually been a gift. They had freed me from any obligation to maintain relationships with people who did not value me. They had given me permission to walk away from toxicity and build something better. Have you ever experienced family betrayal that made you question everything you thought you knew about the people who raised you? What would you have done if you discovered your family had been stealing from you for years while making you feel like the problem? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories help other people realize they are not alone in dealing with toxic family dynamics. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you are born into. Thank you for letting me share my journey from family scapegoat to financial independence and emotional freedom. Remember, you deserve relationships built on respect and genuine love, not manipulation and conditional approval. Sometimes the best thing you can do for toxic family members is let them face the consequences of their own choices while you build the life you actually deserve. Stay strong, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that abuse is normal just because it comes from family.